What is going on, everybody? My name is Evie. You know who I am, though. We are doing a crazy stream today. First time ever, probably in the history of Twitch. We're going to be talking to people on Twitch. What am I talking about? All right. So, anyways, I am here with Anthony and Nick Vaccaro, and for those of you who don't know, they made this little game currently in demo, released on Steam, called Valley of Shadow. And you can go get it right now. If you're here from one of the links I sent, you can actually click on the link directly to the Steam store. If not, somebody will probably post it in chat because I was lazy and forgot to do so. Anyways, why don't we get right to it? I want to start with some introductions here. So we're going to go in alphabetical order, as much as I want to call on Nick first, just to, shame him. Anthony, why don't you give me a quick introduction?
Hey y'all, I'm Anthony Vaccaro. I am basically narrative designer and artist for Valley of Shadow, working with my brother Nick on Center Still Studio, a two-man band.
Awesome. I have other questions before we move on. What are your favorite games beside Valley of Shadow? You can't say that. That's cheating.
No. Valley of Shadow is probably like my least favorite game.
Okay, fair.
No, oh my god, favorite games, jeez. Honestly, one of my favorite games, is going to stand the test of time, is Deep Rock Galactic, which is really brand new over the past couple of years. I'm huge into co-op games. EverQuest, the first EverQuest, the first Diablo. There's so many games. Panzer Dragoon. Some I've heard, just a lot of different games. Those are some of my favorites. The ones that really blew my mind growing up. Wipeout, one of my favorite games, which was a futuristic racing game in the '90s. I could go on and on, but yeah, those are some of my favorite games.
Hey, go on and on if you want. I love it. Why don't we move on then to Nick and ask Nick, who the heck are you?
Good question. I'm Nick Vaccaro. I do all of the coding and puzzle design for Valley of Shadow. That's about it, and just like general technical stuff like website maintenance, all the very exciting, very fun things. And I can go into my favorite games. Is that going to be the next question?
You most definitely should.
I'm a bit of an oracle. I have most of them on display behind me. I've got EverQuest 1 right here. I've got The Witness right here. Diablo 1, which Anthony mentioned. This is actually, I think, the original copy for PlayStation 1 that he and I played growing up. This is my original copy of EverQuest 2. That's Ruins of Kunark. Overwatch is a big one for me. I've been playing that on and off for the past 7 years, however long it's been out. It's one of my favorite games. That probably covers them. Some other especially big influences on Valley of Shadow are Talos Principle, Gone Home, Edith Finch. Those are all fantastic games. Edith Finch I played just within the past couple of years, but when I did, I was like, holy crap, it blew my mind. So that's probably my non-exhaustive list.
Awesome. I love it. All of those games make me happy, so I appreciate that y'all have similar games. Let's see. I'm just gonna go into it. I mean, I can ask more about you, but you know what? I don't care about you. I care about the game. So, Valley of Shadow is an autobiographical puzzle game. Nick, you're already on the big screen. Why don't you start here? What does that mean in general, and what does that mean to you? What exactly is that?
It's funny you start with me because I feel like Anthony will have a better answer for this than I will. But it's essentially, based on a true story of our lives. We are brothers. I don't know if we actually said that or if it's obvious from us having the same last name. But we are brothers. It is told from Anthony's point of view, and the story kind of plays out. It's kind of the story of our childhood and growing up and our experience. Well, in particular, Anthony's experiences, as told through a therapy session with the therapist in the game named Emma. and kind of the puzzles in the game represent like the obstacles and just kind of like working through the trauma. It's like a mechanical representation of the trauma, and working through the obstacles. That is probably my high level take on it. Anthony, do you have more you'd like to add, or?
No, that was pretty good. That's basic. Yeah, that's it. It's yeah, from my point of view, um, I often waver back and forth between feeling like a huge narcissist because like I'm realizing like this is like we're working on this and it's like my point. It really screws me up sometimes because I'm just like who am I for this to be focusing on it. But autobiographically, it is my story going through my life through a death in the family without getting too spoilery. It's really strange. It's like making like a documentary video game without giving too much away. But yeah, it's autobiographical in that way. Our family experienced a death, which was unforeseen, and it was my experience dealing with the grief of that. And not only dealing with the grief of that emotionally, but also finding help. And that is what you, as the player, are moving through. You're looking through my eyes, my ears, my voice, essentially what I experienced going through the process of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy plus in particular. And Nick has been, I mean, everything that I reference is real. Photographs, VHSs, Nick is in pretty much all of them. Our sister Maria is in pretty much all of them. Like, it's autobiographical, capital T, true. Completely genuine.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Let's see. The first thing I sort of wanted to touch on, excuse me, it'll be a little Nick heavy at first here because I was going to start going right into the puzzles, and then kind of move down my list here. I guess I kind of have the questions out of order. My first question was going to talk about just like using light and how your puzzles are very light based, right? So I did have the pleasure of running through this demo on stream a few weeks ago, and one thing I noticed is the puzzles have a very clear theme in them, and it's using the ability to like summon light, right, in order to complete them. So I guess whether you want to go to like an emotional or just a coding or programming place here, like what exactly, I don't know, what was the inspiration, why use that, I suppose.
Wow. So I probably have to go pretty far back. So the game, when we first started developing the game, it was not an autobiographical puzzle game at all. It was, I guess it kind of started as like an open world adventure game, where there were gonna be a bunch of just spells that you find like out in the world, and like Anthony was designing like kind of dungeons and caves that you go through, and we were like doing little puzzles in there. And at the time I was just experimenting with creating different spells. So like I remember dark vision was like one of the original spells, and I was like really excited that I got that working. It was like my first time doing like post-processing in Unity, and like you would cast it, I think everything would like go black and white, and like everything would be brighter and you could see a lot of stuff. And I think light was so man, at the time we were using like and this was Anthony's doing, it was like a cell shaded like effect, which is like Borderlands is probably one of the most popular like cell shaded games, where it looks cartoony and they always have the outline and everything. So we were doing that, and that was like the whole art style for the game. And for some reason I wanted to add the light spell, and Anthony, interject if you remember exactly why. But I think I was like, sorry, do you remember exactly
Everything
what?
was dark. Everything was dark. I was developed like it was taking place in dungeons. So it's like we were in an overworld, but the idea was you would go down into deep dungeons. We were it was really pre-production, so we were trying to figure out like a goal to it, but we were really just having fun. But I wanted it to take place in like going down, almost like Zelda-like, and everything was dark. So the natural inclination for like like a major spell was the light spell. So that's my interjection.
Yeah, and I guess that also explains why Dark Vision was one of the spells that I created. And so those kind of went hand in hand. And there were other spells. I think I implemented one or two other just random spells. But
Haste
at
was
one,
really fun.
what was it? Haste. Yeah, you could zip
Yeah,
around real quick.
haste. Yeah, you did haste. Yeah, you did a lot of really cool spells. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I probably would like to return back to that idea one day. But so everything was really dark, so I created this light spell, and then we had, I think the first kind of like puzzle was you would cast light and it would just like kind of create an orb in front of you. And so I think it might have actually been Anthony's idea, where there would be statues, and the statues would have their hands out, and you would go up to the statues and you would cast light spell on them, and it would create the orb between their hands, and then like their hands would raise up. And that would like open a door or whatever. And so that was like kind of the beginnings of the light puzzles, although it wasn't really light puzzles. It was more just like, put the key in the lock or whatever. And so it kind of evolved from there, but we quickly I think that was kind of the nugget of like, well, this is pretty cool, but like what other light related puzzles can we do? Well, okay, light creates shadows. Like, is there something cool we can do with light and shadow? And that was quite the upheaval, apparently, because the cartoony, cel shaded art style could not handle shadows. And so we had this idea, and Anthony was on board, fortunately, to completely change the entire art style so that we could use shadows in the game. And so that's whenever we went from like this cartoony, cel shaded aesthetic to this kind of like, somewhat realistic aesthetic, quite realistic, I think, aesthetic. And that was to create puzzles out of the light spell, and it kind of grew from there. It was very iterative. There was another instance. The game was still kind of open world, but over time we like kind of honed it down to like this very linear experience that it is now. And I think that's kind of the genesis of the light spell. And then at one point, so the other spells in the game, you only experienced light because that's all that's in the demo. There are two other spells. There's Force Missile, which is essentially Magic Missile, but I don't know what the copywriting is around Magic Missile, so we call it Force Missile. And then Fireball. Those are the three spells, and they're like very kind of iconic fantasy spells. I feel like if you have played D&D even once, you probably know about these spells. Oh, Anthony posted. Yeah. I don't know if you can show that at all. It's in our chat in the thing.
Yeah, I have access to like old footage of what Nick is talking about.
Okay,
So
I can do that, but it's gonna ruin the immersion. Are you all okay with that? I'm just gonna exit full screen. Everybody's gonna see our chat. So did we say anything bad about the?
No, I talked a lot of crap on a lot of people.
I know, me too.
So
yeah, I'm just taking names.
Okay, here it is right now. So, Nick or Anthony, walk me through what this image is of again. This is
Anthony,
the original. One of the
So I was just working on something. So it was interesting. Yeah, we're about to go. I'm about to ruin all of your next questions because this is about to be a deep dive. So yeah, I was as the artist. So Nick, we had just finished doing client work. This was in like November of 2017. We experienced the family death in 2016. And we were in the middle of doing like hardcore like client work for like musicians, like making video games for them. We were doing it for a couple of years. So we stopped doing that in 2017. We did our final one, and we said, no more. Nick took a couple of months off from game dev, from Center Steel, and I was like, I'm just gonna play around in the Unity engine. Yeah, the dreaded. Sorry. Yeah. So I was like, I'm just gonna play around in the Unity engine. I just need to get. I have a bunch of feelings. I want to get these feelings out. So I started making something like really bright and pretty because I was depressed, very depressed. And what you see there is kind of was just playing with landscapes, and I was like, I want it to be cel shaded. I want it to be real bright and sunny, and have this like cartoony, like almost like a Wind Waker look to it. Excuse me. And I put a house on a hill, um, which I have no other. I don't think I have any other photos of that, but that is what the look was like. That was above ground, and then we had below ground as well, um, which I might be able to find some of those. But we had below ground as well, which is what Nick was just talking about. Let's see. Like we were able to like move through the world, and then Nick started adding spells. I added like a candle to a player's hand, and you could start going through and like picking up keys. Like Nick came in about January and was like, "Hey, can I do anything?" And I was like, "Yeah, can you put some like functionality into the game? Can you put like clicking on stuff and like activating and moving things left and right and up and down?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." And then that evolved into like Nick wanted to start developing again and do some more work. So it was really dark. I started putting dungeons in, and with like you're just carrying this little candle around. It's just like in Unity, it's just a light source on the player, So Nick was like, "I want to put spells in." So yeah, the very first thing was a light spell. So I had this imagery I wanted to give you some idea of what it looked like and what it eventually evolved into, which is what you see now in the demo.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. I will say I'm disappointed that in the demo I didn't get to shoot fireballs, but knowing that that might be a future endeavor, I'm pretty happy about that. So we'll see how that goes. Super
Very
interesting.
much so.
actually,
It is.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
kind of on that topic. So one of our original ideas. So we had the light spell. I think that was kind of the first, like the only spell that we had for a while. In addition to like the dark vision, but eventually we jettisoned anything that wasn't light. And the idea was, I remember Anthony and I meeting at a coffee shop in Philly because we both lived in Philadelphia at the time. And we sketched out like, okay, what spells do we want in this game? And that's when we decided they're going to be the iconic spells from D&D essentially, but also just like from fantasy in general. But we also wanted them to be like, we picked Magic Missile and Fireball because there were also enemies in the game at the time. And we wanted spells that you could use to defeat enemies, but then also use like their secondary properties to solve puzzles essentially. And so like the light thing was that one was kind of a standalone, but the magic missile, obviously you could shoot enemies with magic missile. Fireball, you could light them on fire. And so the enemies have since been removed from the game, but the spells remain. And so, as much as possible, I've tried to take those spells and figure out like, okay, well, magic missile, its primary use that everybody is familiar with is destroying monsters, but like what are some puzzle ideas behind that? Like what are the alternative properties of magic missile that people don't typically think about? And so one of the big ones is that it always like unerringly hits its target, and so like pathing is like a big thing with magic missile. Like you got to figure out like, okay, what path is it going to take, where am I going to stand, that sort of thing. And so yeah, so whenever fireball comes around, like we try to keep it impactful and like exciting, even though you're not destroying monsters or anything like that with it. So that's kind of, I don't know, that's the whole philosophy around the spells and the puzzles, and how they work.
I love it. I see Anthony in the chat says all of Nick's genius idea. I did want to say that I said that this would be spoiler free for the first half, and then we literally went to talk about the next spells you'll get in the game. Hopefully not really too spoiler, but heads up to everybody.
Yeah.
The first half will be a little milder, and then as we get to the second half of this, I am gonna probably ask questions that might spoil some of the future game, but I don't think anyone's giving away the ending here. So no, that's great. I
don't really view the spells as spoilery. In fact, we have them listed on our Steam page, like in the description, because it's I don't know. I guess we could. It's funny, like it could be its own whole standalone game with just the light spell. But I feel like the game really, at least puzzle-wise, the game really starts to pick up as you get these additional spells, because it's not like you get Fireball and you lose light. I've tried to combine all of the spells, and puzzle-wise, I think that's where they start to kind of get interesting. Like, okay, well, how does the light spell interact with the Fireball spell, and how does magic missile, like Fireball can blow up a wall and then you can shoot magic missile through it, whereas like you otherwise you couldn't. And so yeah, that's I think where they get the most interesting.
I love it, and glad it's not a spoiler. Then that's just sometimes I
It's
just
yeah,
say
there's a
things.
little bit of one. Uh-huh.
I'm trying to
Okay,
be. I'm trying to be like real quiet because like that's when it starts going into like story, you know, because like we
Yeah.
really tried to combine. Like as Nick was doing that, I was in a parallel mode, like watching what Nick was doing, and then he would do a push on GitHub in Unity and be like, check out this, you know, look at this, like play this puzzle for him, let me know what you think. And I'd be playing it, and I'd be just like, I would be like kind of faceting them, like the mechanics that Nick was developing into some kind of narrative or story that I was developing. So we tried to really combine this. So I guess that's all I'll say without getting spoilery, because the spells are deep. We made them deep.
I'm excited to see it. I had some questions about your use of space, specifically in the puzzles. This would be back to Nick because it seemed at first, you see a Unity game where you're moving at a certain pace, where you're getting spells, where you're walking around, these beautiful landscapes. And my first thought was, it was not that you can jump and run in this game, and I was kind of surprised to see that when I hit space, I actually jumped. There was one case, I think, so far in this game where jumping was actually something you had to do. But now that you mentioned the other spells, I think this question might be a lot quicker. I was going to ask about the use of space. How important do you think it is in traversing it other than walking? Like, are we going to be running and jumping a lot? Is that just something that every game has, so you just have it in there? Or is it something that you kind of are intentionally using? And I guess we'll start with Nick again there.
Yeah, that's a good question. It very much started, the stock Unity character controller comes with sprinting and jumping. And so we actually do remove it at certain points in the game, because it did end up like when you're this isn't spoiler because it is in the demo, but when you're back in the home, you can't sprint and you can't jump, just because people were finding so many bugs by just like jumping out of bounds and stuff. So we've removed it from there. It is, yeah, I do play with it in that one puzzle that you mentioned for light. I think it is important to be able to sprint for the puzzles, only because like later on when you get magic missile, because of how it works and because the missiles have to like traverse space becomes more important, and so the rooms have to become larger and you have to be moving around them a lot. So I think it's important to be able to sprint, to the areas that you need to get to quicker. But then there's also having the slower movement speed is better for something like light, where you have to be a little more precise with where you're putting it. And so, if you're holding in shift and you press D, you move maybe 1 unit, whereas you want to move a quarter of a unit or whatever. Jumping, I think jumping kind of just lets us do like some fun stuff with the level design in particular later on. There's there is that one puzzle, and frankly, I think that's probably a lot of people's favorite puzzle in the demo. At least it was, like, at the conventions we would go to. That's kind of the puzzle where everything's kind of leading up to that puzzle at the beginning, and that's kind of the first, like, oh, okay, like I actually have to think. It's like kind of an aha moment puzzle. And so that's pretty cool. But yeah, they kind of started just because they were there, and we do some interesting things with them, but they also do get in the way sometimes.
That makes sense. I just want to say to everybody in chat, we do see you. Hello. I'm sorry that we're kind of ignoring you. Usually have a big chat bar up here. But yeah, we are all in chat. We're all watching. If you do have any questions you want to ask, feel free to toss them in there. If anything sounds like it's right up the alley for this, I'll definitely throw it in here. In the meantime, my other questions were kind of about difficulty ramping, how the puzzles tie into the game, future puzzle plans, and it sounds like you really talking about the different spells and talking about stuff. I think you hit on a lot of that. So I guess this will be more of a general. Do you have any other comments on maybe difficulty ramping? You know, how you feel the demo ended versus how you want the difficulty to ramp in by, let's say, the mystical end game that none of us know about yet. Anything like that?
Yeah, difficulty ramping it's difficult in puzzle games already, and then I've actually had to scale it back a lot because it the game's kind of 50-50 story puzzle, and so I don't want people to get to a point in a puzzle where it's so difficult that they drop out. But at the same time, the puzzles have to get difficult, otherwise they're just kind of boring. And so I've spent a lot of time just like watching people play test in order to kind of like smooth out the difficulty ramp, and I'm still working on that. We have got a couple play tests on force missile. Nobody has really touched fireball yet, so I'm a little excited and a little nervous whenever we actually get people.
Give me the fireball, please. Right.
Absolutely, yeah, I would love to have you play test it. I think it's mostly ready for play testing. I just have to review it. But yeah, it's difficult. So there are like harder puzzles that I've had to just like kind of completely rip out of the game just because like too many people were getting stuck on it. And one thing I want to say is that it's primarily because we're a linear puzzle game. If we were open world, like kind of Talos Principle or Witness, like these open world games can get away with having more difficult puzzles, because if you get stuck on a puzzle, you just walk away from it and you can go do another puzzle. Whereas if you get stuck on a puzzle in our game, there's no walking away to go do anything else. There's just quitting out of the game, and we don't want that. At a certain point, we're not trying to trap people in our game or anything like that. And if you quit out with the intention of coming back, that's fine too. But we don't want people to get frustrated. I've played puzzle games myself where I get to a point and I'm frustrated and just don't really know what to do. So I quit out, just kind of never return to it. And so as much as possible, we don't want that. And so I think the puzzles as a result are a little easier than they otherwise could be or would be. But then we do have the optional puzzles at the end of every floor, where I do get to have a little bit of fun, and I do get to make them, much more difficult and a little more interesting because they are optional and, people don't have to do them. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. Difficulty is a difficult thing. Anthony, do you have anything to add to that? From your perspective?
Yeah, actually, not a lot, but an important point that was really important to me. Like Nick really got me into puzzle games through this. Like originally I wasn't a big puzzle gamer. That's all been Nick's cup of tea for like literally the past decade. And he got me really like enjoying them and like seeing what they could do mechanically and those aha moments. And the thing that I wanted to add to try to make Nick's life better, like easier with the difficulty ramping, was to be like, okay, let's say that somebody starts to get frustrated with a puzzle, right? Because, for whatever number of reasons, we're dealing in 3D space, like where there's a lot of variables for the puzzles. What can I do to help smooth that out? I can't do anything mechanically, but I can do things narratively. So what I have been trying to do, and I think that has been we've been successful in this regard, was to make the story so interesting that you want to get past. Like you might be having like a really hard time in this room, whatever room 2.6, like 2.6, let's say. You're having a really hard time, but you're like, I gotta know what happens next. I have to know. I'm not gonna quit yet. I need to figure this out. And that has been huge. Like I was like, okay, that's, you know what I mean? Like it started out kind of soft, but it became like the more that the narrative dangles, like the juicier that carrot looks on that stick, like the more that they will try to get through this puzzle. I can't, like I'm sure Nick probably has ideas, thoughts on what that means for puzzle design, but for me it was like I have no control over Nick's puzzle design, right? So like that's his baby, so my baby's the narrative. Let me help him out in that regard. And that actually, been paving the way for like at least 2 or 3 years of like what the narrative has become. Like, let's make the narrative so juicy, so deep, so interesting that like you want to get through this entire game because you need to see what happens at the end of it. So that is my on difficulty ramping for puzzle design, is like, what can the narrative do to facilitate that, to help ease that, to get more play testers all the way through so Nick can see the entire scope of a floor or a temple. And I think that so far we've been pretty successful.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of me in a way. Like, I still want to make the puzzles as good as possible, but you know, the puzzles, I equate it. I always come back to The Witness, which is just like the pinnacle of puzzle games. But like in that game, it's all about the puzzles, and so if the puzzles are lacking in any way, like the game is lacking. Whereas in our game, if the puzzles are lacking, the story can, it picks up the slack, and kind of vice versa. If they're and Anthony and I have talked about that a lot, where it's like we, you know, both sides of this thing can kind of like pick up the other side in a way.
Makes sense. Yeah. I just, as a warning, this little talk is going to get slowly closer into spoiler territory from here. I'm going to try to stick with talking about art right now, but in order to talk about art, I want to talk about each scene and what's in there, so we are starting to get into the spoilers. So just a heads up for anybody who really wants to at least play the demo before they get immersed in that. We're saving this as a VOD. Come see it later. Not trying to kick you out, but just be careful. So yeah, I wanted to talk about the art, and I cannot talk about the art without the story, because the first scene of this game, the first level per se, before it even becomes levels, you're walking down a hallway, and that hallway gets wild fast. So I could go into detail. I don't even want to start talking about it. I just want to hand it off maybe to you, Anthony. Just walk us through that first scene and what's going on, and preferably talk about some art, but obviously the story's well ingrained into that, so I'll just let you go crazy with
it. Yeah, no, there's nothing to say about it. No, it's yeah, so it is, yeah, the very first hallway that you walk in, the very first time that we wanted you to experience the game, we want to let you know exactly what's happening. And a lot of that is like, so what was it? We experienced a death in the family. Like, this ties directly into the therapy hallway. Like, the very first hallway that you experience is the very first steps you take as a player is the hallway leading into the therapist's office. And I, as myself, like a cishet, like white man, like waited until the very last moment of my, like the darkest moment of my life, like 4 years after the death in the family, to reach out to a therapist. So what I wanted to do eventually, this wasn't what I wanted to do back in 2017. This is whenever Nick and I, like, were developing puzzles, the game's getting darker and darker, and I'm trying to figure out what is the thread of the narrative. Like, what is the player actually listening to? What I wanted to do was immediately let you as the player know, like, this is a therapy session. I don't want to spring it on you. I don't want to kind of like trick you into it. I want to give you visually, I as the visual artist and the audio artist, I want to give you something pretty, get you in there, get your hands on that controller, get your hands on the keyboard, and now you're in it. Because most people, if I come out and say, or Nick and I in the marketing is like, it's a game about therapy, like, most people, especially men, are not going to touch it. And I say this as that earlier demographic. So what I want to do is like, here, look at this, get your hands on this. Okay, haha, now you're in a therapy session. And like, to the point where it's like, I need to go to the end of this hallway, like this, I want to see what this is. And like 9.5 times out of 10, like in conventions, people like will just straight up just go in and they will complete the entire demo. And that's what that hallway is. You immediately hear the therapist, hi Anthony, welcome back. And hi, Emma. So you immediately hear our two voices. Like, there you go. Those are the only two characters in the game that you will hear. And that takes you through the entire thing. I wanted it to focus you completely in. You need to be focused. You need to be completely enveloped in this world. And that's what we've been building. And the puzzles, that's what I was realizing with the narrative is like that goes into the temples, goes into the puzzles, but that the whole game keeps you focused. The whole game, if you have earphones on or you are listening to the audio, like you are in this thing, and that's how it feels. Like I call the game for myself an artist's rendition of cognitive behavioral therapy. Like this is how it feels when you're talking to it, like when you're really going through this and one is being honest with oneself and like really feeling the emotions, and the person is a doctor of psychology that knows what they're doing. I was very lucky. I found a really good one. And it feels like you're really in it. Like you close your eyes, and I close my eyes, and I'm in a place, and that I am being walked through this place. And that's what I wanted to portray in the game visually and orally. You hear the almost like a call and response between the two. The call is me kind of calling out my emotions. Evie, I think you when you play through, like you really feel that. You feel like I try to give you my emotions through it, and the response is basically how I felt in the response that I was getting through actual therapy. So the first hallway is getting you completely locked in. It's introducing you to the entire kind of the entire narrative without you really, this is spoiler, without you really kind of realizing it. Like this is the game.
I will say, if somebody described the game just in the literal sense to me, it would not have been a game that sounded like something I wanted to play, because that definitely, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to feel sad. That's fine, whatever. But I see what you're saying, and I mean, it worked. It worked on me. Whether I was feeling pressured by the fact that I promised to play this demo, maybe I was like, oh, no going back now. But either way, it definitely made me have to go through it. I mean, I didn't know how long I was going to stream it that night. But anyways, we can move on to other questions. But
we have to. With that in mind, with what you just said, is like we do want to be careful. Like we've been really just head down getting the work done, and we've been discussing really hardcore with our sister as well. Our sister Maria is the voice of Emma also, so it's a triune experience. You get the entire family in this game. But we've been discussing really heavily like what kind of content warnings and such that we will put on the front end, right? So it's like we want to get you in. Our goal is, and my goal visually, is to get you interested in what you're looking at and to want to touch the game, to want to connect with it, and then be like, okay, all right, we got you interested. Now, just forewarning, this is what the game is now about, right? We want to get you in without words, without saying it's a therapy session. Like, completely agree with you, and also don't want to like pull the rug out from under you, because there's a lot of there's a lot of traumatic content in it, with the good with the good and the risk of being so vulnerable. I think all of us know how traumatic a lot of our childhoods were, and like this is a lot of this stuff resonates because we feel it again. So we do want to gather some actual content warnings, some proper ones that won't scare people away, but to just let you as the player know, like, this is what you're about to get into. Cool. Thank you for being interested, and this is what you're about to get into. So it's a tightrope. It's a tightrope walk. I just wanted to put that out there.
Definitely. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Let's see. So yeah, we got through the first scene, and then I wanted to talk about the gigundous, like when you do the puzzles, they're in these giant rooms, right? But I guess before that, let's back up. You come into an outdoor area. Why don't we just kind of talk about them as a whole? And once again, I think this is going to be mostly Anthony. Sorry, Nick, you had your time. Now you're just going to have to sit there. And
now I get to relax and enjoy.
If you want to interject at any point, please do. I don't know who to point all the questions at all the time. But yeah, if we want to just talk in general about that too. I mean, I'm really putting it all on you to talk about it. I'm not even asking pointed questions. I'm just like, talk about the next level.
That's fine.
Yeah, let's talk about the outdoor and the indoor. I mean, it's the same area, right? It seems to be some sort of Is it like a cathedral? I mean, I know you mentioned dungeons early on, but I feel like it moved from that, right? So is it a cathedral? Is that a spoiler? I don't know.
It's a cathedral. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
type of cathedral. Yeah, it is. Uh, yes. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like how much to not spoil now. I mean, it's not really spoilery. Like, we've hidden so many things and like so many sets of uh abstraction into it and allegory and metaphor. But the Temple of Light that you were going through is a cathedral, and it means something. And it's not until you get to the second one, which you might have the privilege of, playtesting for us, like under the hood, behind the scenes. But like when you get to there is a second one, then there's a third one, and they start to kind of build this like metaphorical tapestry. Like they are the container of something. So the cathedral, the building, it contains something. It's like going to church or your actual house. It's like artistically, abstractly, they contain something. This cathedral contains these puzzles. It contains this story about this. And then there are other ones following that contain other things. Um, which artistically, narratively, is trying to build a thread of my life, because it's my story going through it. Feels weird to just always say that. Like it's really weird to think that, but for me, but building the story of one's life that makes sense. Because the thing about going through a therapeutic session is when you're in depression, when you're in anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, or clinical depression, major depressive disorder, one is experiencing all these things all at once, and none of them make sense. So the process that one is going through here is narrowing it down, focusing it, and then trying to put it into an order that makes sense so that we can then deal with it. So you will hear, and you've heard, Emma say, this belongs a lot. Like this belongs. And that will mean something that will make a lot more sense later on in the narrative as well. But like that is what it's introducing you into. So you're on this kind of linear path, excuse me, which is what most puzzle games are, which is fantastic. And you're kind of putting a puzzle together. Like so that's what it is. It's a container of all of these puzzle pieces, the photos of which are a part of it, the VHS of which are a part of it, the discs that you collect, the little 3.5-inch floppies that you collect, of which are a part of it. So it's been quite a project, but that's what the exterior goes into the interior, comes back out to the exterior, goes back into the interior. It's there's an allegory for that too, but I don't want to spoil that. I want people that play it fully to get that eventually.
On a more, I guess, surface level, Anthony, I don't know if you don't want to talk about this because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but the art style is based on something, right? Like the Temple of Light is based on something. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to hold off on that?
That's what I was kind of touching on with when you get
Okay.
to the Temple of Force, then you'll start to see what it's actually based on. I don't want to give it away, but yes, it is based on something. That's a more succinct way of what I was trying to say. It's literally based on something, and that then ties deeper into the narrative. Somebody said, I'll give a hint. I'll give a hint. It was about Nick's puzzle. I'm sorry, what was it? The dreaded Woken said, I like how the spells tie in with the old school games referenced in the game. That's all I'm going to say. So that has to do with
I did want to
with that.
mention that I was calling it a cathedral, and the minute you said Temple of Light, I'm like, is that a spoiler in itself? Anyways, we're gonna move on from that though, because oh yeah, and
Yeah.
Kitten, stop spoiling things. That's my wife, by the way. Anyways,
Oh, nice.
That's fine. No, it's cool. It's cool. We've buried a lot into this game, so giving one thing away, won't really do it. It's really is about just like the experience of moving through it, which is cool. So I'm not super worried.
Yeah, and I'm totally kidding. No worries. Somebody mentioned that they wishlisted Valley of Shadow, and I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh,
and for anybody
thank
in
you.
here, wishlisting is such a powerful thing you can do for a developer even before the game comes out. So if you all want to give it a wishlist, that'd be great. I'll paste it in chat one more time here. And We have time for maybe a couple questions before we might have to jump into that 3-minute ad break, and I apologize for that once again. I'll cry more about it in a second, but this is why I said the art would definitely be spoilers. Like, I was like, it's not going to be just about the art, but that's okay. So I don't think we can go further into the cathedral. I think I completely underestimated how long these questions would take. So I wanted to talk kind of, one thing I really noticed was, at first it seemed like there was like this deafening silence until you start walking, and when you're in that temple or the cathedral, it's so loud. Those footsteps are just, just like you were in a giant building where the acoustics are insane and it's super loud and everything. I don't know. I guess given the nature of the game, I don't think we need to get into every individual asset or every facet of what's going on. So I mean, if you want to touch on that, you can, or we can just keep moving to the next thing.
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because that's one of like the that's like one of the little touches, and that's completely Anthony. Anthony did that. He's done most of the audio work. I might hook it up or whatever, but it's his ideas. But like, yeah, just like the echoing sound effects of the footsteps is just like, it's such a kind of a small thing, but like all those small things build up and like kind of create the entire atmosphere. And I'm so glad that you called that out specifically, because that is just like, yeah, it's really cool.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. This is a passion project on both Nick and I's part for sure. I can't take all the credit, because like there are times when Nick would be like, like I'm even thinking about that in particular, those footsteps. I don't remember when we put those in, but like Nick and I just have constant conversations about everything. It starts with quote unquote my vision a little bit, but it very quickly becomes just like a duo, like a dyad effort between the two of us. But overall, like the feeling that I, as narrative designer, want you to have, we try to portray. So yeah, that is one of those. Like, it feels big and open and airy, and like you walk into that, well, actually what's called the entrance room of the Temple of Light, and like there's windows busted out, and there's just like snow coming in and snow covered. It's like, that's what I want you to feel. So we try to make it so that's what you're feeling, because that's how I felt. So it's like yeah, that's what it feels like. Is what grief sometimes feels like. Is like you feel like you're cold, alone, abandoned. And so then the rest of the process of the game is like, where does that come from? Why do you feel like that? Like, how can you not control it, but how does it, like, where does it belong? Stop trying to fight it. And that's what it is. It's like, you just now, hopefully you as the player, this is great. Like, how did you feel, Evie? I'm curious. Like, I watched you.
Hey, we interviewing me now?
Yeah, that's part of it though. Is like the connection between
how does it feel?
The material and
yeah.
How does it feel? I just drop out of the call.
yeah, I gotta go. Sorry, something came up. I actually also wanted to mention, I know it's an hour in, but I wanted to mention that is the real gameplay back there in the background. If you want me to jump into a level or show something, I absolutely can. But anyways, I mean, the reason I asked about the hallways, because I think hearing the dialogue, I immediately, I mean, like you said, it's to make it very clear, like this is what the dialogue might be for the entire game. You're getting ready for something. I was like, this is either going to be a very optimistic, feel-good game, or this is going to completely wreck me emotionally for weeks and cause me major concerns. And depending on how it ends, I don't know how that's going to be. But I will say that, going from that to the outdoor area was cool. I think it was clear that you entered like something in your mind, right? It went from real to not real, or at least to more abstract. But moving into the building, and I mean, the reason I mentioned the footsteps is because that is the first thing I noticed walking through there. I didn't know it was me walking at first, because you know how sometimes you move in a game at a different pace than you walk in real life, and the footsteps feel like they don't align quite right, and kind of gives you that paranoia. So I had that at first until I got used to it being, my footsteps in the game, and it definitely it gave me I don't know, that openness, that emptiness is definitely once again, just to keep it abstract, it's definitely a feeling. I don't know exactly. Again, it could go in any direction depending on, is this a horror game? Is this a Temple of Light where you're going to find some hope? And I think your game throws plenty of all aspects of those feelings, obviously more some than the other depending on where you are in the game. And anyways, we'll avoid the spoilers. We have we have an ad in just 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to ask like a quick question here. I wanted to start talking about the home area, which once again, spoilers if you haven't played the demo yet, but it's in the demo, so I think it should be okay to talk about. But before we do that, something a little quicker. Can we talk about the green items in the game? Is that too spoily? Like
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's fun.
there's handprints. There's some maybe some like either binary or some sort of digits occasionally like plastered on the walls.
Yeah.
Can we get a couple minute thing going on with that, and then we can take a quick 3 minute break here, and then come back, and we can either continue with that or move on to the next thing.
Yeah, like the bright green. We wanted to, kind of as we were developing, we needed something to show that you can interact with stuff. So, and this was a couple of years ago. So we started to remember the whole time that you're just playing a game, right? Like the very foundation of this is you're just interacting with a video game. So every now and again, we will take tropes and they're almost fourth wall breaking, almost. And the green for me in particular was from the new Doom 2016, not the newest Doom, but like the level design in Doom 2016 was just masterful. And it's like everywhere that you see green, you know immediately where to go. And like so we were having kind of trouble a couple of years ago with people knowing what to interact with. Like there's levers you have to pull for the crystals, things like that. So we're like, let's just spray like glow in the dark green everywhere. And that worked. It was great. Like it doesn't break immersion. You're still in this like hell of a mindscape, and like, oh, green, I pick it up. There you go. Like it doesn't break anything. So that was the introduction of that.
Oh, that's great. That's perfect. Yeah, and I mean, when I saw that on a wall, I mean, I knew there was something there, and if I had to look up, down, around until I
Mhm.
found it, then but I knew absolutely something had to be there, so that was pretty exciting. So what I'm
Yeah.
going to do is because we have to do this 3 minute ad every hour to avoid pre-roll ads, so you don't actually get hit by ads when you walk in here. For anybody who's coming in and out, we're going to run a 3 minute ad here. It should be pretty fast, about 3 minutes exactly. So I will kind of make us disappear. For anybody who is subscribed and doesn't get ads, you're going to watch them like N64 video game ads or something. That's usually what I play instead. So y'all have fun. We'll see you in a couple minutes, and yeah, don't go anywhere. Thank you, everybody. Be back soon.
Don't touch that dial.
Don't touch that dial. That's right. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you all for sticking around. I know that's not our favorite thing in the world, but here we are. Just before I lose the train of thought there, Anthony, you were talking about the green things and how they can kind of help you traverse the world and figure out where you're supposed to go. Is there anything else you want to talk about with that, or did we kind of wrap that up already?
No, I think that's yeah. Like just as a UI example. I'm not talking about anything that they're on mechanically, because each of those is just like, an iceberg of of other game design. No, yeah, that was very basic. It wasn't basic. It's when it comes obviously to game design, everything that one adds into the game itself touches every other part of the game. So we need to be very careful. We've learned over time we need to be very careful on what we put in the game. So once we decided on and tested just with ourselves like the green, and we realized it worked, and we realized the players that were interacting with it were properly interacting with it, that was like, okay, that's in, we're good. But before putting it in, it's we're thinking, how immersive do we want the game to be? Will it break immersion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes there were a lot of instances in this game where we we're just going to put it in. Like something needs to be done with this issue we're having. We're just gonna, it's okay. We're just gonna put that in. And I think that was probably one example. And it turned out to be really great. There's a scene. Nick, is the bathroom scene in the Temple of Force? It is in the Temple of Force,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, so yes, so there's a scene which we're particularly proud of, um, similar to the parents' room scene with the video game screen and playing video games with dad. Similar to that, but more um, uh, 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 um, immersive. I want to use the word aggressive, but like more immersive, which incorporates the green handprints which turned out to be so, like using that, but like, okay, I want to push this a little bit more. You're in a dark room and now all you see are green handprints, and it's like, oh, that's spooky as hell. So it's like, it really, you find a way to make it work for you. So it's like you use game design theory and mechanics and practice to try to enhance the narrative. They should, to me, to us, I think they should work hand in hand. There is a way to make this stuff work. One just has to find out what that is. Sometimes it's getting rid of something entirely, but for the green handprints in particular, that's what I'm still talking about. For the green handprints in particular, it's like, okay, let's dive further into it. Let's use it more. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun.
Kind of an interesting random little tidbit on that is that it's like such a powerful thing. It draws people's attention so much that there have been instances where we put green handprints on things that are interactive but are not important. So like and maybe this will bleed into the rest of the conversation, but like in the home scene, there's a bunch of light switches, and like they're where the light switches were in the real home, and so they're there and they're interactable, but we kind of, I don't know, somewhat blindly we're like, well, they're interactable, they should have the green handprints. And a lot of people when playtesting were like interacting with these things because they're interactable, but expecting them to like drive the story forward, and they didn't. They were just like, fun little things. So we removed the green handprints from the, I guess, not critical path things in the home. And so that was kind of a learning experience for us, I think, as designers.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the light switch having them, because I would never have thought to actually click the light switch, because that was not a mechanic that I was introduced to. So I appreciate that, because otherwise I would have been in dark rooms a lot in that game saying, "What the hell do I do in here? I can't see anything." So
that's actually reminding me. Yeah, so early on, the light switches in particular are reminding me. Early on, narratively, it was more open. So while Nick was developing puzzles, this is a couple of years ago, 2018 to 2019. I wanted the home to be kind of like you could just explore it, just like a regular person's house. Okay, so you can explore, you can click on stuff, but what one finds out quickly is that the more high fidelity something is, the less acclimated to game design it becomes, because now, okay, what else is interactable? Like, can I open the fridge? Oh no. Okay, well, can I click on a light? Yes. Okay, that's weird. What, so now the player is overwhelmed. So that became, over the course of probably like a year, as we were honing down the narrative alongside the puzzle design, that became an issue. It's like, okay, no, this cannot be just no holds barred, player can go and do anything, because that makes no sense. So we have to really narrow it down. So actually, that I'm remembering that became part of the impetus to make a more linear story as well. Originally, it was kind of more open, you're exploring my life, blah, blah, blah. But now it's like, no, it really became a linear experience. And then that facilitated game design theory, like the green handprints. That's reminding me of that. That was a nightmare.
And actually, yeah, kind of playing off of that a little bit, you talk about exploring the home openly. There were a lot more interactables in the home, and it was very much like, I want to say Gone Home does it, where you can just like kind of click on anything and you'll like pick it up and you can rotate it and inspect it. And we had a lot of that stuff in the home, but then it was kind of like we didn't want to do that for everything in the home. And so it was kind of arbitrary, the things we were attaching that to and the things we weren't. And then because it's a puzzle game, like people would look for meaning in like, okay, well, there's a mug on the table, why can I pick it up and inspect it? It must be related to a puzzle, right? And so we completely eliminated all of that from the home. You can now only interact with things that are like actually important, but we also added zooming into the home. So if you hold in right click, you zoom in, so you can still closely inspect pretty much everything now without us arbitrarily deciding like what things you can or cannot pick up. So that was, I think, probably around the same time. We added that a couple of years ago, and I remember that being kind of a significant switch.
Awesome, yeah, I appreciate that, and yeah, that makes total sense. Let's see. I guess we the green everything did kind of bring us into the home instance. So maybe we can talk a bit about that. I swear everything isn't just about the art and the locations. We'll get back into other things later. But first thing I want to talk about, let's talk about outside of the home, because I think you get a similar feel as outside of the temple. It's purple and foggy. It's relatively dark, but you can see details outside in the fog around the house. So let's talk about the. I mean, if it makes more sense to talk about the inside first, we can. But let's talk about. No, let's talk about the outside first. I have decided we're going to talk about the outside. So what? I guess what I want to know is is the purple fog just because you already used it for the other area? Like, is there a reason you're using that specific kind of thing? I had some opinions on it before, and I can talk about it after, but I want to hear like what what your thought process was, not just the fog, but just the scenery, everything in general with that outdoor area. Yeah, whoever wants to go first.
That outdoor area, the outdoor area in particular for the house, or just everything outdoors in the game?
We can talk about the house unless you have something to say about all of
Okay.
it. I mean, it's all up to
No,
you.
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that goes back to kind of the inception of what the game was really becoming. When I was, this is visually, again, Nick and I are always, anytime I say this, I want to point out, I always try to point out, because it is a team effort. Nick has been crushing it. You see and hear all of my stuff, but Nick is like 50-50. We are easily 50-50 on this game. So visually, early on, the game was, more colorful, cutesy. I don't want to say cutesy, but more Wind Wakery, cell shaded. And I started to treat it. This won't become a more abstract conversation, I promise. But I started to treat it more like art. So when people say games are art, that can be very true. Like, I started to treat it like, how am I feeling internally? I started to treat the Unity software, the Unity engine, as just a blank canvas. Okay, how am I feeling? I'm just gonna I'm depressed. I don't realize I'm depressed. I don't use these words, but like I'm just splashing paint on a canvas. And that just over time became like this dark, almost horror-esque Tim Burton-y type of like environment. And that really just like the dark purple was so pretty, because there's beauty and pain to me. Like, it was just so pretty. I wanted something pretty and beautiful, but also very painful. And that's how I felt. That's how the whole world felt to me at that point. So that's the world that I started putting on the canvas, and that really just held the entire time. And our question was asked about the house, which we were probably coming upon, but like that's where we are. Is like it is our childhood home, and it no longer exists. It hasn't existed for a long time. It hasn't existed for probably like 12 or 15 years, and the that feels that way whenever I'm around it. Like when you end up in that driveway, it's like every time I think about it, every time I think, like that's where this darkness has been leading me this entire time, is back to my childhood. And so that thread held the entire time, and it just was we were just getting such good emotional feedback from it. Every time I went into it, I felt the same way. If I would have to test a room, I was like, this feels horrible. This is what we want to do. Like it never feels neutral to me. Which to me was telling me I was on the right track, because that's what I wanted to do. Right? I wanted to. Is this emotional? Okay, good. Keep following this. And that's what the purple is. That's what the haze, the fog of time and memory. It's all that's what it feels like walking through it. So that's what we wanted to portray there. So hopefully you feel that way, or some semblance of it.
No, not at all. No, I'm kidding. I did feel that way. Actually, what I really thought of, and maybe it's just because some of the elements of this experience had, nostalgic, games in it and stuff. I don't want to go too much into detail about that. We can probably touch on that later if we don't run out of time. But one thing I thought of was, when older Unity games, and even like pre-Unity, a lot of games would have that like fog that would just like hit at a certain point. I think it gave me feelings like that, like maybe someone walking through a video game environment, like it was almost intentionally so, while at the same time,
Yeah.
you know, not nearly being as low fidelity as that, but it still gave that
Yeah.
kind of
Silent
feeling.
Hill.
So,
Silent Hill
mhm.
comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was
Horror
thinking of.
game
So
tropes that
I
really
guess
work.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess depending on how you feel about, you know, nostalgia for something that's not there anymore, maybe that is a similar. Maybe I'm just hitting on a similar subject, but no, I appreciate that. I do want to talk about the home itself too and the creation. You did touch on it. Yeah, because when I was playing this, I was saying like, did they 3D scan this? Did they grab every single thing and make it from scratch? And luckily Nick was in the chat and said, no, we just using their memory. You know, like it's something that's been gone for a while, and for one, that crushed me, and for two, just how did you
Good.
manage? Like, is it so accurate, or is it like, did you just kind of go by how it felt, or did you actually manage to have this photographic memory to remember all of that? And we can go into the
Yeah.
emotional side and just the like, how the hell did you remember all of that?
Yeah, it was very traumatic. I mean, you know, many of us have traumatic childhoods. Like, I bet I'd be willing to bet a paycheck that if I asked you to sit in a room by yourself for a month and think about your childhood, you'd be able to do something very similar. You'd be able to like start sketching it out and drawing it like once you start moving through the rooms again in your head, or think about a Christmas you might have had, or you know, like you start thinking, regardless of how traumatic those moments might have been, the landscape in your head is clearer than you think. And so that was the basics, that was the basis of it. That was the foundation of me starting to 3D model it. And I 3D modeled it because I was Twitch streaming. This is a really funny story. I was Twitch streaming in 2018. It was a couple months after we started, and I started to go a bit more high fidelity, but I was really bad. Like I was okay in Blender, really bad texture artist. And I was Twitch streaming, and some random viewer asked me specifically, verbatim, "Can I ask you a question?" Like I'm Twitch streaming the production of the art and stuff, and one of the dungeons I was making, and a viewer said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And they said, "Why does the art look so bad?" And that's what they said to me. I'm like, and I'm just like, in the moment, I'm just like looking at the chat, you know, and I'm just like, I guess I'm just not that good, you know, blah, blah, blah. And like, so that was like a kick in the pants to be like, all right, like I got to get out of GIMP, get out of Photoshop, stop doing it by hand. Like, what do the pros use? And the pros use, at the time it was a logarithmic, but they were purchased by Adobe because, you know, capitalism's a hellscape. But they were purchased by Adobe, but it's Substance Painter. It's called the Substance Suite. So I started, you know, learning how to use, I was like, I need to learn how to do texturing. I need to do it. I want to do photorealistic texturing. So I was like, so I combined learning something with, I want there to be a hub in this game. Nick and I are talking about bringing the spells back to a place. I was like, I want to make our childhood home. So that's what I started doing. So I was practicing learning 3D art and texturing professionally, like high fidelity, on our childhood home. And then that was like, okay, I remember the dining room being like this, the living room being like this. I remember our room. I remember walking through it, and I was getting emotional the entire time because I was still treating it as a canvas, as an art canvas. So I was just doing that, and then I would show it to. I remember, I think I had the entire first floor done. I might have actually had the stairs going upstairs as well to the second floor, and I had Maria walk through it. No, I don't think she walked through it. I think I was like making. It was our sister. I would think I was making like GIFs or videos of it, just like screen grabbing, and I sent it to her, and she was crying watching it because she hadn't seen that house in like 15 years. And then I showed it to our mom, and like then they started giving me feedback. Well, that wasn't there. That was actually over here. Well, this door was actually further. So then it started becoming a collaborative process from memory, and then our mom started giving me more photographs of like just us in Christmas when Nick was like 3 years old. But like I could see snippets of rooms, and I started collating all of that and then forming the house out of that. So it's a collaborative process. The foundation of it was based on memory, but the end result, which you see there, is a collaborative process based, a family process essentially.
Two things. One, imagine deciding you want to get better at texturing and just doing it. Good on you for that. I don't think I have the willpower to ever just learn something because I need to learn it or want to learn it. I need to be forced to do it. Secondly, don't ever ask me to actually try to sit down for a month and do that. That sounds
No, I would never.
that sounds awful.
No, I would never. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would never. I would never. What I'm saying is,
Right. I see what you're
you
saying.
could.
I went into my mind for a couple seconds there. I immediately went out. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I see
Yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah, yes. And that's why nobody makes the Valley of Shadow, and that's why
Right.
Nick and I are so ready to be done with it.
Mm-hmm. That makes
Imagine
sense.
doing that for 5 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we can move away from the home stuff unless there's anything else that you or Nick, if you have anything else you want to say about the creation of the home, whether it's the art or just the in general, like just making that area. I know it's less like it's puzzle and less programming. I know we talked about why you got rid of jumping because that was kind of problematic in an area like that. But was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Nothing specific really comes to mind. We've tried to do some interesting thing. Like it's not clear that it's our actual childhood home, and so we try to do some things. I forget if it's in the demo. I don't know if it's in the. I don't think it is in the demo. But there's one point at which you go into one of the rooms, and there's a video playing. There's a home video playing, and at the end of the video, like it just happened. So I don't know, Anthony, how many home videos do you have total to choose from?
At least, I think 16.
16. Okay, so we
Yeah.
have all these videos, and like one of them, the one that we decided to play here, happened to end on like a still shot of like the room that you're actually standing in whenever you're watching the video. And so we tried. I don't know how this is hard to play test because it's like it's between the two, between chapter 1, which is the demo, and chapter 2, which is Magic Missile. And so like not many people have holistically play tested all of that stuff. So I don't know how successful we actually are, but when you watch this video, it like freeze frames on the end, and then we like turn the character to look, and we've tried to like frame it exactly as it shows up in the video to kind of push the idea that like this is the real house. And we did something else with that, I think, that has since been removed from the game, where there was like a photo that you would pick up. You know how you can like inspect the photos, at least in the temple. You can't really do it in the home, but you inspect the photo, and we did something similar where we pan the camera over so that the photo is perfectly lined up with the home, and then the photo dissolves. So we've tried to do like kind of, I don't know, some interesting stuff like that to show that it is the real house, because I do think, I mean, yeah, not many games do that. I can't think of any game that ever has, and I think it is kind of a cool thing that Anthony has done, and it's unique.
There's something to that. There's something that I learned through Nick's teaching me about puzzle games. Again, I wasn't a puzzle gamer until Nick really started playing them a lot and being like, you should really play this. The Witness, Talos Principle, What Remains of Edith Finch to a degree. But like the aha moment is so powerful, so potent. That's like what you're trying to do with a puzzle game. And like I guess one thing that I really like, I didn't know I would like it, but like when we were at conventions and watching people play it in real time, even watching you like play on your VOD, like when I was replaying it, is like just watching, being like, oh my god, this is real. Like the aha moment emotionally in a player's head is just so beautiful. It's so magical. So it's like, how do you say that without saying it? You know what I mean? Like there's pictures everywhere in the game. I think we have like 120 photos thus far that the player can collect, and they appear back in the home. Spoiler, it's the second hour, but they appear back in the home. But like those photos, a lot of them were taken in the house. So a merely astute player will be maybe looking at the photo and realizing, oh my god, that's the same doorway. You know what I mean? Like, so it's those things, like the aha moments. Like I really wanted to bring like a piece of puzzle gaming to the narrative, in that way, in basically the way that Nick is saying, some overt but mostly implicit. And that's hard to do, but we have to be confident in our ability to do that. It's just confidence that takes us through.
Yeah, I can't say for certainty if I would have known 100% based on what I have seen. I know Nick was in the chat. I was able to say, hey, is this actually the house? And he's like,
Right.
Yupper. I will say that, there were the two realizations. The first, which came pretty fast when I saw some photos that this is someone's actual life and probably a real thing. Nick came in a little later, so I wasn't able to be like, Nick, is this real? At the beginning. So that was just, I had to assume that it was. And the second was, yeah, when you realize that the house isn't just a 3D model or, canned assets or anything. It's just it's a real, or, it's a real place in someone's mind, and at one point a real place in the world, and that's insane. So before I move further from that, I do want to say the spoilers get worse from here because I want to start talking about some of the collectible items, some of the special puzzles that lead to different things. So from here on, major spoilers. When we put this on YouTube someday, there's going to be a giant spoiler alert somewhere. I don't know. Let's talk about just the collectibles that you just get throughout the game without even trying. There's photos. I was going to say, and videos. You already mentioned that, but let's just talk about the photos. Why are you plastering all 6 million of your family? By the way, so many family photos. That's insane. Why are you plastering 5 million family photos in here? I mean, we know why you're doing this game, so obviously part of it makes sense. But what compelled you to actually use these photos, put them in the game? Actually, you know what? First question. Are the writings on the back, besides probably being edited for anonymity and stuff, are the writings in the back what was actually written on those photos, or did you just put what made sense to put on those photos?
Yeah, we put what made sense on the back of the photos.
Okay.
We wrote them in our mother's, not handwriting, in like her personality, because all the photos, it does bleed into your first question, but the photos were given to us. So after the death in the family, part of the grieving process, which wasn't specifically selected, but like part of it was like, like when someone passes away, when someone dies suddenly or dies over a long period of time, the first thing you want to do is remember them. And so it's just like, I'm literally sitting next to a bunch of I'm sitting next to like 20 photo albums that was like given to us from one of our parents. And you're just looking through them, and like artistically, I was like, this is our childhood home, there's photos in it, like I want to, it was interesting. Again, artistically, visually, it was part of the artistic process. I just started, like, straight up, the ones you're looking at, to give you a little behind the scenes in game development, those are not scanned in. All those photos were taken with a smartphone and then put into GIMP and then just edited that way and then thrown in. I was like sad, so I was like, I want to see pieces of this here. I want to put this here. I want to put this there, so it's kind of walking through one's pain. And then before you realize it, that's the cool thing. That was one of the great things about the narrative building itself, is like one starts realizing, if one has all this material, that like it kind of tells a story. Like if you it could be chronological, it could be seasonal, it could be personality wise, but like one can put together a story with one's childhood material. So that's what that became, and it fit the narrative. It fit the mechanical narrative, the overarching narrative about being with a therapist, because this is, Nick and I have talked about this several times, but it's busy work, so to speak. It's important, but it's part of the process, is like doing all of the work. One has to do the work to make it through this puzzle of life. So it works on multiple levels, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a million questions here. I'm trying to see which one makes sense to go next. Let's just go into the videos for now. Kind of in a similar fashion. You said you had a few to work with here. I guess just moving into the same kind of spoilery general question of so now we know why there are photos in the game. We know what it does to the player. I know what it does to the player, being one of them at some point. I know what the videos do too, but why did you throw videos in there? Like, what were you trying? Why did you break my heart and add more stuff like that? I'm just kidding. No. So I mean, obviously, like we can say, well, because it's videos, it's sound, it's movement. Is it just simply it adds more than what a photo does? Is that all it is, or did you have a specific? I mean, you mentioned one can actually be used as a way to kind of show that the house is a real place. What other reasons may the videos have served? I guess for that.
That's difficult. I want to touch on what you just said though. You said what the photos have done to you, but so I'm going to pause there because I have an answer for you for your question. But how did you feel when you saw the photos?
Stop making me say things. I'm just kidding.
I need to. It's part of my job. I love it.
The very first photo made me think a million things. I think I mentioned this on the stream too, but it was like, for one, I didn't know you could turn them over, so I apologize. The first 10 photos did not have as much context. That might have helped. I was a little confused to see an actual photo in the game, but knowing that this had started with a therapy thing going on, knowing that the themes were the way they were, it made me. I had the immediate question of is this little Nick? Because at that point I've already talked to Nick before. We met from a separate game, and then he said oh, I'm also working on this, and I'm like, I love this and I want to demo it, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, I'm gonna demo it on stream someday because I love the attention, so I do everything on stream. Anyways, so I'm sitting here playing this, and my immediate thought is is this little Nick? What's going on here? And it wasn't until later on when I realized you could turn it over that in fact they had names on them, and I would have known based on the names who they were. But it was a lot of oh no. I think maybe it's being jaded from reality, in the 2020s especially, where, and like you said, everybody relating to similar childhoods, whether yours was traumatic or not, you still have that, you still understand, I guess, that feeling of nostalgia and how it can affect you in a lot of ways, for better or worse. And so those pictures give you nostalgia. They're old photos. I really was trying to say I wonder if these are real or not. And I knew the whole time they were real, but for some reason I wanted to assume nobody had 1,000 photos. Personally, I might have 2 photos of me as a kid, and I think my family might have 5. You know what I mean? So it was a different experience. I'm who actually takes that many? And then I remembered probably a lot of other people too. So it made me. It gave me a lot of different emotions all at once. I think for me they might have been a little not negative, but definitely kind of a melancholic kind of nostalgia. Just being in some ways I'm this person is lucky to have so many photos, and in other ways I'm I'm playing through this game and clearly there are things going on, and clearly everybody is blessed and cursed and suffers and enjoys in different ways, especially when you're younger. And I have a feeling this is going to turn to where that's kind of where I realized things were not going to be as optimistic as I thought. I'm this might have a happy ending, but whatever I have to go through in the meantime is probably not going to be so good. So that's what they did to me. They immediately they prepared me, and also may have set the mood for me very quickly, despite just being a picture of a kid. You know what I mean? It still set the mood of, why am I seeing this picture? You wouldn't be sharing this with me unless I needed to get more intimate with whoever this is. And that's sort of what it did to me.
No, it's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And it's Nick and I were at a convention with actually several other people. I think we were at PAX last year, and there was a gentleman that sat down, probably in his 40s, maybe 50s, but he sat down, he put the headphones on, he started playing it, and he got through it was the demo, and he got to I don't know, it was the middle of floor 1. It was a picture of our dad in the 70s, and he started crying this gentleman did, and he started crying. And one of our friends, who's actually in the chat right now, Gunslinger, was with us, and he gave him ripped off a paper towel and gave it to the gentleman, because we didn't have Kleenex, and we should always have Kleenex for this game. But he said that our dad reminded him of his mom. And it's just those things that one never realizes. It's we all have been through it, regardless of how many photos one might have. Totally agreed. Yeah, we're lucky in that regard for sure. But regardless of that, the memories that you have connect to it. And it's we're not just hyper individuals. We're all connected to the same fabric. Really, life is just a big part of game design. Like every part affects every other part. But I'm glad that those photos affected you in that way. And now to bring that back to your VHS question, is that tells me and has told me since as a narrative designer, since we started kind of really making this about like the narrative and about like a therapy session, that we have a huge responsibility. Like I cannot, as a story writer, leave you or anybody else that plays it, I cannot leave you in that headspace through the entire game. The game cannot end poorly. It cannot end sadly. It can't. Like, it's sadder than the demo. Come on, man. Like the amount of people that will never play video games again.
If the ending
You know what I
was
mean?
Like,
oh no,
sucks. Sorry, no.
Yeah, it's like sucks. Life's hell. It's like that's not that's not true. And B, I have to show you a way out. And like that is a huge responsibility. I'm happy to take it on because that's my job here now. I've accepted that. But I have to show how I did it. I have to show what was told to me. I have to show what I did with all of this stuff. And that is so the VHS digs you even deeper. Like you just, okay, go. We're going. We're gonna go. Like you want out of the car, get out of the car now because this does not stop until we get to the destination. And there is a destination. It's not like, yeah, no, I'm sad. That's it. Credits roll. Like it's not that. So that's all planned out. I'm almost done writing the rest of the game, thank God. And Nick and I are working on the back end to produce the last chapter of the game. But yeah, everything that you see is meant to grip you in. And actually, that feeling of foreboding and melancholy is taken. I wanted to touch on that narratively because I take all of that from horror tropes. It's like nobody wants to be terrified. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to sit in terror, but there's something about a good horror film or a good horror story that's just like, tell me more. I'm like, I'm about to pee myself, like it's like we're taking that as like, good, you feel melancholic? Cool, check the next photo. Okay, keep going. It's like there's something in you that wants to keep doing this. So that is what it's always art with technicality because that's all game design is kind of tricking the player. You know what I mean? Like I'm not in your world, you're in my world. Whether you're playing Super Mario Brothers or Gone Home or EverQuest or Valley of Shadow, you're in my world. I'm controlling you. And that's what narratively I'm trying to use. And Nick is doing his own thing with the puzzles as well, and we're trying to combine them in that way. You're playing you're in our world. And hopefully I can lead you out of it into a place that can help, that can be like, okay, no, the world isn't actually that bad,
I'm thinking, was it one of the old EverQuest commercials that said you're in our world now, or is it a different game? Was that it?
Is that what it was?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. That sounded so familiar when you said that. I wanted I wanted to ask two things.
We should, man.
That actually gave me a new question that I have to ask right away now. But first, I want to say, yeah, that's why suspense as its own genre, I think, is a thing because you don't necessarily want to be scared. You want to like be ready to be scared. You want to be ready to feel something. Mm-hmm. You want to have that feeling. But moving away from that, sort of. Do you have a fear that people are going to, like, halfway through your game in maybe some of the darkest of moments, like, no spoilers, I'm just assuming here, will want to just leave and just have this bad feeling and then never come back to it, and then your game is just a bad feeling to them? Is that, like, a concern of yours? I mean, obviously you've taken steps to try to make people feel like they have to finish that journey, but I guess on a scale of whatever scale you want to make, how do you feel about the risk of that happening, I guess?
Yeah, like the walk away, that's a great point. That's a really fantastic and beautiful point, and that's what makes this so dangerous. What I'm trying to do narratively is not make any particular temple worse than another. So the hardest moments are going to be right before the ending, and even as I'm writing it, it's difficult to write the dialogue, and that is, there's things that I'm trying to do narratively that are trying to buoy you from not doing that, and that includes writing Emma's part, and we're going to have to start getting our sister involved in interviews like this as well, because that is where Emma comes in, and she's been there the entire time, and it's this belongs. It is the calmness of that. People have asked her specifically, in person, are you an actual licensed therapist? Like, because that's how she sounds. You know, like her and I worked very, very hard to get that sound right, get what it actually felt like for me to be in it. So the danger is there. Yeah, the danger is there. And where I'm trying to figure out how do you do a content warning to start filtering out people that don't want to touch it at all. That's great, you know. I'm hoping nobody does. But that's an impossibility. I'm hoping it's zero. But yeah, the fear's always there, you know, of like not wanting to continue. It's like too dark. Um, I don't know how to do that without appealing to Emma, without appealing to the good of the story, if that makes sense, without appealing to the other voice that's constantly in your head. And I'm trying to push that narratively, dialogue wise. I'm trying to push that. I hope that we get it right.
Yeah, that's true.
Sense.
All of the kind of the darkest parts have her come in almost immediately, right? I'm trying to think through, like, I've experienced as much of the game as possible at this point, and like I think, I don't think there's ever a point at which like something heavy is dumped on you and just left on you. I do think that she kind of always comes in.
Yeah, with the idea of anchoring,
Absolutely.
for instance. Yeah, you know,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
yeah, breathe, let's anchor. It's okay. This belongs.
Hey,
It's like
hey,
a
that's a question.
constant.
That's a question for later. Come on, I'm just kidding.
All right, all right, all right, all right. No,
No,
you're
no,
right.
not absolutely.
We're
Talk
in
about
your
whatever you
world
want.
now, Evie.
Yeah, you're in my world.
It's the Ouroboros.
Oh boy. No, I will say I completely agree. The Emma dialogue is definitely doing its job, at least for the demo, as far as I've seen. And I promise I will talk more about my side of things later. I know you wanted some of that too, and I feel bad that I've mostly just interviewed you, but I need to ask you questions. That's more important right now, and then I'll jump in later. One thing I want to touch on, and hey Nick, I'm finally gonna call on you again. I'm so sorry. I know you've just been sitting there like, hey, can I grab a
No,
drink
it's
or
fine.
something? No. The I want to talk about some of the other collectibles, right? And one of them is, well, I guess both of them have kind of things that would pertain to you. The main thing is there are some things that require kind of different puzzles that are unrelated to the light puzzles so far. Sort of there's like kind of checkpoints. Maybe they're at the end of each level. I don't actually know how the levels are separated. I saw the level select, but I didn't like see. Maybe at the end of each level, it seemed like there was like sometimes a special puzzle, and there was a cool collectible at the end of those, a special one that each one is like a unique 3D model and stuff too, so we can touch on that after. But uh, maybe we can talk about those puzzles. You know, they're pretty different, so I just want to learn a bit about the puzzles and also tell us like what those things are, and then I'll turn back to Anthony after and maybe ask him about the creating those and how they meld into the story. Once again, major spoilers here, so.
Hmm. Yeah. So those puzzles specifically, I think I want to say it was kind of Anthony's idea to begin with, and I've kind of run with it. But they are, yeah, spoilers. They're completely optional. You're right that they are like they're special puzzles essentially at the end of each level. So at the end of each level, there's some sort of essentially like important story advancing scene that happens, and within that same room there is always a we've tried to hide them, but there are like these optional puzzles, and they are always kind of they're based on something. And I guess I'll leave it a little vague, just like how kind of the areas that you're within are based on something. Each of these optional puzzles is based on something from our childhood and from our lives. Um, and as much as possible I tried to like integrate that into the puzzles themselves, but because they're optional I'm able to have fun with them. Essentially, like, I'm able to do something completely off the wall because they don't prevent the player from progressing through the story. And so so Evie, I know, one of the ones that you did, you had to understand binary, which the majority of people do not. And like we've showed that one, that one's been in the game for a long time, and so all of the conventions that we've gone to, people will run into it, and some people will know it. Some people will be like, oh, I've heard of binary before, but I gotta look it up and I gotta Google it, and like that's fine. I'm okay with that. But that it's the sort of thing where it's like it requires outside knowledge. It doesn't like logically build up from the light puzzles, and so I think that's why they're so fun for me to design as a puzzle designer, because like at this point I don't really have fun designing the puzzles because of how the difficulty has to build up over time, and it has to be linear, and it's not like I can have a cool idea for a puzzle and throw that in. Like that does happen from time to time, but like every time that happens, it's like, okay, well, I have to also design 3 other puzzles to build up to this puzzle, because like there's a new idea that I'm putting in here, and if people just come into that, they're not prepared for it. They need to kind of be led up to that point. But these optional puzzles aren't like that. These optional puzzles are just like, yeah, I like binary. I have an engineering background, and I'm going to put a binary puzzle in there. And I think whenever I first put it in there, I think there was a little bit of like back and forth between me and Anthony about like, well, is anybody ever going to get it? Right? It's like nobody's going to understand binary. And then fortunately, and I'm like, yeah, probably not. But then we go to a convention, and like, as long as one other person can solve those puzzles, that's enough for me, because it lets me know that they are solvable. And
You also added a little hint to that one though, right? I mean, there's a
we did.
So at least
We
you
tried
added an
to-
option for those who
Yep.
who don't understand it right away. Like, here you go. Here's a thing that kind of gives it away, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of people were just originally it was the poster that has a hint. The word binary is on something in the level, and then there's just a series of switches. And they have like you can kind of tell they're zeros and ones. So like that's the extra hint. But there still wasn't like if you didn't understand binary, you still couldn't figure that out. So a lot of people were not figuring it out. So we added a little piece of paper that can kind of step you through. So if you want to spend additional time here and try to figure out what's going on, like we kind of try to teach you binary like in that moment. Um, but these are puzzles where I I do not expect everybody to solve them, right? Especially some of the later ones. I really ramped it up later on in the game, like the difficulty of them. Because I almost don't want everybody to be able to solve them. They're supposed to be kind of an extra, like if you want to go hard on this game and you want to 100% complete it, like you got to work for that, right? And so some of these optional puzzles are that way. And so that's why I feel a little more comfortable making the critical path puzzles, like toning the difficulty down, because we want everybody to experience the story. And to your point earlier, like we don't want somebody to get to like the darkest part of the story and then run into a puzzle they can't solve, and then it's like, well, crap.
Makes sense.
And so I can extract some of that difficulty and put it in these optional puzzles. And so yeah, those are like the funnest puzzles for me to design, just because I do whatever in them.
So what you're saying is, if I do get those puzzles right and I do get the collectible, I don't get like cheat codes. I don't get big head mode or anything like that.
I don't think you do. You
All
will
right,
get.
we'll talk.
I mean,
We'll make it happen.
we'll do it. Yeah, big head. You grow to twice the size. We are. I don't know. We have grander plans for a lot of the collectibles, but I forget exactly how it's all going to work together, because I love whenever games do that, when there's almost like a game-wide puzzle while you're solving these individual puzzles. There's a game-wide puzzle, and all of my favorite games do that. And so, we want to do that in this game. We have plans to do it, and I forget if these optional puzzles actually play into those or not. But at the very least, there's going to be a Steam achievement for collecting all of those, so you'll have that.
Awesome. Well, now you've just made it, so I have no choice. So I appreciate that. I did just want to say that Anthony has actually confirmed there will be big head mode now. So holding you to it. Sorry. Anyways, sorry, Anthony, you were going to say something.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We have just recently kind of gone over it a couple of times amongst our meetings for everything else. 30% of game dev is like actually just meetings on on how to finish the game. Yeah, we have big plans for something if you 100% it. I think in particular the narrative puzzles. Yeah, if you get all of the narrative puzzles, then you gain something. I will say that, but I cannot give any of it away.
Yes, there will be
And
a
it was
benefit to doing
very brilliant.
all of the work.
Yeah. It was very brilliant and very beautiful. That's what I mean. Is like if you could just get to the end of the game, please just get to the end of it. You know.
Sounds good.
But yeah. Nick
I
did an awesome job for that.
I did want to loop around a little bit and talk about the other collectibles because
Yes, thank you. That was my next question. So go ahead.
As much as possible, I've tried to sink my puzzle making claws into the other collectibles. So like even like the VHS tapes that play, the first one you come upon is like very obvious. It's kind of in your face, but then over time we like hide them more and more. And so those even have become puzzles on their own. They're more like exploratory puzzles, but they are very much like, I don't know, if you get to the end of a level and you haven't gotten the VHS, we kind of want you to realize that and be like, oh crap, how did I miss it? Like, what do I got to do in order to find it? And even those kind of ramp up in difficulty over time where like there's one point at which, well, I don't know, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's one point at which like you have to figure out how to get onto the other side of like a wall in order to get one of the VHS tapes, and it's not obvious at all.
Wait, is this pre Fireball or?
It's in the magic missile area, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget. I don't remember what any of the Fireball
Hey, it's
ones.
not a spoiler.
Evie,
You said it's in the Steam description. I'm allowed to talk about Fireball. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's
You'll get it.
So you actually
get your greedy hands on Fireball.
I need that Fireball. Like, I want that to be first temple. I'm just kidding. Okay, so one thing I wanted to ask about the other collectible, actually, that we haven't talked about yet. The little green digits and the green items. Sometimes a weird... once again, spoilers, everybody. Just leave now if you don't want this. They're like... I thought they were pieces of mannequins or something, but like there's always these green... like either handprints or binary bits, and it's like... weird objects, and then there's usually a different collectible. They all seem to be the same like 3D object, and right now they seem to do absolutely nothing for the game, so probably just another achievement collectible or something. But do we want to talk about those? Are those super secret? Are they super spoily or anything? Or either one of you.
I don't think they are. It's funny, things have changed so much over time. So they are diskettes. We called them floppy disks for the longest time, but they're not technically floppy disks, so I don't want to make anybody angry by calling them that.
There goes the computer scientist.
They're diskettes. They came after floppy disks.
Whatever, dude.
There's people that would get angry.
Go.
And so originally they were, I think originally they were in there they were the way that you could, so later in the game there's going to be a way to like basically revisit all of the levels that you've already played, right? Right now that exists through UI, but we're going to remove it from the UI and it's going to be like actually integrated into the game. And the floppies were going to be like it's a save state, right? It's like that's kind of you quote unquote saving that level so you can return to it later. But then I think I was talking to somebody at PAX or something, and I forget what it was exactly, but I had the realization that like, well, if you miss them, you're not going to be able to return to that level, and so it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. So I think we've done away with that completely, but I do believe we still have plans for them to be functional in the game. That is very much spoiler, and I don't want to say exactly what it is, but they will have like an actual mechanical reason to collect all of them in the game, in addition to probably a Steam achievement. So I think that's the mechanical reasoning behind them. Anthony, if there's like more specific kind of like narrative reasons you want to go into, you can.
Yeah, it was part of part of collectability, but I do remember them just being very kind of like inundated, like endemic to our household, just like growing up, especially with our first computer. It was just a really big time. Like the fact that the game takes place in the 80s, 90s, and kind of aughts, and oh my God, no, it takes place over the course of like 35 years. So yeah, like it takes place, but like it really focuses on our childhood. So like there's just a lot of I'm sorry, diskettes floating around the house. I remember them at school. I really wanted to put those in to really push the nostalgia of the time, of the era. Like they're everywhere. They're fun to collect, and um, again, there's only a couple little things in the game that remind you that you're playing a game. One is the green handprints, and the other one was we want them to collect something um, a bit more fun. And the diskettes, God, the diskettes are fun to collect. They're fun to find, fun to
Just
collect.
call them
They are
floppies. It's fun. I'm just.
not here. I know my audience, but so like they're fun to collect and they're nondescript. So the VHSs, there's a lot of work that we got to know where they go. I gotta figure something out. I gotta like watch like hundreds of hours of VHS from our childhood and like figure out what's gonna go on where. The floppies are like they're fun to collect, not much work. I almost gave away a lot of spoilers, but they're regular, they're cyclical. And then they do tie, just like the green handprints for me, they also tie into something heavily nostalgic later if you complete that. So yeah, it just kind of rung all the bells for me. So I was happy to put them in.
One thing I maybe just now remembered, and I don't know which came first, but I think I think Anthony in particular wanted a lot of exploration in the game. And so, like, at a certain point, the game was primarily puzzle solving, going from one room to the next. And the story was, somewhat different at the time, but none of these collectibles existed. I think maybe photos were in the game. But it was, I don't know. It was not boring. Boring isn't the word, but it's just a lot. It's just one puzzle after another, and I think it was a good idea to add in more exploratory things where it's like, okay, I've solved the puzzle. Is there anything else in this room? Let me look around a little bit. Oh, cool! I was rewarded for looking around, and so I think the floppies somewhat came from that as well.
You're
Again,
right.
I'm sure it was like
Very gamey.
a couple of different things happening at once, but like the floppies kind of came
Yeah.
from that. We reward people with these optional puzzles that you talked about earlier, Evie. The VHSs are an additional, like they have story meaning, but they also reward people who delve deeper into the game and spend more time with the game and just explore and look around. um, and so I think to some extent all of these collectibles kind of were born from like, okay, it's a puzzle game, there's a story that is being added to it, but it could be a lot better if you could also explore and be moving around the space. And I think that was kind of the genesis for a lot of this stuff, and then a lot of the dominoes kind of fell into place of like, oh, this fits the story very well.
Yeah, yeah. That reminds me of. I remember that when we were narrowing it down, the game. This was back in 2018, I want to say, and there was a big open world. So the part where you are in the therapy hallway in the very beginning of the game, and then you come out to the exterior. That exterior is an extremely linear, narrowed down, like almost myopic version of what it was in 2018, which was like open world puzzle, like Witness-esque that Nick was building. So there were like exterior puzzles outside and all the purple haze and stuff, and there's just stuff you could do like with weird levers and things like that. And then you would then you would do all that, and then there was a giant wall with an opening, like a door, and you can go through the door and then go through like one giant hallway of like, I don't know, 18 puzzle rooms or something. And it was just puzzle, 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 puzzle. And I remember we gave it to one of our colleagues to play test it. And I think he was like playtesting that, and like by halfway through, he was like exhausted. I remember he was just like, "This is too many puzzles, man! Like in a row, like break them up somehow." And that was years ago. And I remember like I'm recalling kind of our design theory at that time was like very nascent, but we were being informed about like that kind of design theory about like how brain stamina, you know what I mean, like to start breaking things up, right? So like one long floor became 4 floors, and then now the 4 floors with all these rooms, now there's things to do inside of the rooms that don't have anything to do with the puzzle. So like we're trying to figure that cycle out for the player so they're not exhausted the entire time. And not only are they not exhausted, but it's not also just story, because then they would be bored. It's just a walking simulator, right? So we're trying, so that's me kind of like honing in on the flow. Like what Nick is saying about the floppies is true. Like we were trying to like remind you that you're playing a game, like gamify it, in a way, but that fits with the cycle for the player, so they don't get fatigued.
I love it. You said Steam achievements. That's all you had to say, and I'm going to get them all now. So it's completely fine. Whatever else you said doesn't even matter anymore. In fact, this whole interview, all I remember is that there are 2 types of secrets that have Steam achievements linked to them, and so for all y'all looking to fill those up, trading cards. Do you have trading cards? We're not even gonna start. Okay.
I'm sure we will.
That's a lot of work. We got to do it. We'll do it.
Yeah,
it always happens
like
eventually. It always happens eventually,
Yeah.
But I won't.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to ask the release date because we already talked about this, and I'm not even going to get a good answer. You know what? I will ask anyways. Nick, what about that release date that you've been telling me? You told me the exact date. What are you going to tell them?
If you go on our Steam page and you watch the trailer, we have one trailer on the Steam page. If you get to the very end, it says releasing in 2022. So that's the official release date.
Okay, well, 2022, everybody be on the lookout. Last year.
If you can find the full game, let us know. So we're hoping to, we're really gunning for within the next year finishing it up. Our incentive is we've been working on this thing for 5-6 years now, and it's an important game and everything, but it can't. We don't want to do another 5 to 6 years, right? So at this point, we're I kind of have a kind of trying to get a plan in mind for like, okay, by the end of this year, we release a beta, and then we have 6 months or so of next year to like, get it from beta to completion, essentially. So
for some genres, I would say, how dare you, but I'm going to say in this particular case, I think it's safe to say I will not release this until it's done. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Like, you have to be, I don't think you can rush something like this. I think so. Yeah. I'm gonna say I don't think anybody's gonna be pushing you too hard. It's not like It's not like you have some sort of backer plan where people paid you hundreds of dollars and you expect. You know what I mean? Like I think we're gonna be patient about that, and we're just gonna wait and see. Anyways. I actually managed to run through all of the most important questions. Everything I had at the end was like, if we didn't touch on this, we have to touch on this, and we touched on all of those things. So what I want to do is, this is completely up to you. If you want to just, talk about anything that you feel like we didn't talk about yet, or I know you keep yelling at me to say things. If you have any questions for me, I'm just going to, wax poetic like I always do about it anyways. So, this is all about y'all. So, Nick, Anthony, what do you want to do for the last? I mean, we only have like 8 minutes, right?
Oh wow!
Yeah, there was something I wanted to touch on about the house. It's like it is artistic, like visually, and again, you see and hear all of my work. But like up until probably the last year, the house is extremely it's a complex system. And Nick has been spending several of the past months really just optimizing it, because there's a lot of moving in, through, and out of things. Like whenever one gets to, I don't even know if it's in the Temple of Light, but once you start getting to the Temple of Force, you really start playing with the house. Like you're not doing anything in the house like mechanically, but the house becomes like a more dynamic landscape, and it comes into and out of temples and things like that. So there's like rooms are in the way of hallways. Like it's, imagine like a bunch of scenes just like sitting on top of each other. And Nick has had to really do a hell of a lot of work like optimizing my my artistic like chaos. Like I'll bring the thing in, it looks beautiful on the front end, but on the back end, it's just like the artist equivalent of spaghetti code. So Nick has to come in and be like, this room has to shut off, this room has to turn on, this, the lights change here, like the whole environment changes, this needs to be optimized, the frame rate's chugging, things like that. So it's a very, I just wanted to push that because like all the work is, there's a lot of work in putting your childhood home in a video game and like making it make sense, and a lot of that work is on the back end.
Yeah, there's a lot of trickery. In fact, like it still isn't fully optimized. I still have a lot of stuff on my plate I gotta do. But like you said, like for instance, the parents' room, right? You enter the parents' room halfway through the demo or so, but like the first time you come to the house, you don't go into the parents' room, and so this is going to get pretty technical pretty quickly, but for certain reasons, we can't use like there are certain optimizations that you can normally do in a game. There's something called occlusion calling, which means like anything that is not currently visible on the screen is not rendered, is not like sent to your graphics card and actually rendered. But because of the dynamic nature of the home scene, we can't use that. So we have to do optimizations like manual optimizations. So like the parents' room you come to later, but since you don't do it your first time through, it's completely turned off and the door is closed, so you can walk up to it and see the door, but like the underlying like the thing, it's just like empty space in there. But as you're playing through, like you kind of don't realize that, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, that kind of trickery, and it gets more difficult as the game progresses because more and more doors open and they stay open, and so it's like, well, we can't just turn that room off wholesale, we have to do some other kind of trickery, like maybe the upstairs is turned off while you're downstairs and vice versa, that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, yeah. And I want to bring that up because I'm doing basically none of that. Like kudos to Nick for doing all of that. So it's like all of that great beauty, and it's like the melancholy feeling, etc. That is only possible because I have Nick to come in on the back end and be like, all right, how does it work? And it's like it's a thing of beauty. It truly is. Like it's really wild. It's wild to see it. I have no clue how he does half of it. I love
I have
it.
no clue how I do half of it either. That's the
You just close your eyes and go, baby.
hitting the keyboards.
It's like a million monkeys with typewriters,
Yeah.
making Shakespeare. Yeah, great.
Yeah. I'll say in my years of production, I know who I pity more, and it's not always the artists. Artists, I don't know how they do it. It's magic, but their magic just comes and goes, and then when it comes to programming, coding, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like artists, I'm like, okay, you sold your soul to something to get that. That's fine. But when it comes to programming, I'm like, no, you read way too many books. I'm just kidding. You're all super talented.
No, it's no. I completely agree. No, yeah. It's a really dynamic system. Like it's like a very like a teamwork, right? Like it really a huge part of game development, if you're not a solo dev, if you're working with even one other person, is like the communication between the two of you. Like, do you trust each other? Like Nick has to trust me a lot, I have to trust Nick a lot. Like I can't give Nick any feedback on anything he's doing, and he can't give me any feedback on what we can give like little, like, oh, this doesn't make sense, blah 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 blah, but like when it comes to the story, Nick is just like, all right, the end of the game's gonna be great. Just go write it. You know what I mean? And it's same for Nick. Is like, all right, I'm at 60 frames a second. Don't know how you did it, but awesome. And it's like, that's what it is. It's like, you're absolutely right. Like the muse strikes, we're really good at, we work through the muse and before the muse. Artists have a very potent skill set, but engineers for video games have an equally potent skill set that is never seen directly. So it's like there's a lot of kudos to you, Nick, for keeping this thing afloat.
And I think some of us see it. I think you're right. The average
sure.
player probably it's just taken for granted. The art is beautiful. That's amazing. You did a good job making this, but it's like, did you also notice that you made it here from the other level magically? No.
You just floated there. Well, through the ether on Pixie Dust.
Definitely not lost on me, I swear. Couple minutes left. Any last remarks? Anything else?
I don't think so. Thanks for doing all this, hosting us. This is a lot of fun.
Hey, it's no problem. It's been an honor. Y'all are awesome. It's
so much fun.
that game has made me feel a lot of feels, and one of these days maybe we can have a separate chat offline or something if you want to talk more about it. But yeah, definitely. Let's bring Maria in here next time. I want to hear about that too. I didn't ask because I knew I should have asked anyways for the sake of the viewer, because why am I? This isn't for my sake. This is for everyone's sake. I was going to say, hey, did you hire your therapist as a voice actress? But you sort of already said it in the interview earlier. So obviously it's not your therapist. Actually, it's not even just some random voice actress. It is in fact another family member, which is awesome. But we can touch on that another day. I think that's got to be another day because we're right at the end here. I'm assuming y'all have actual hard deadlines.
Great.
I'm here all day. If you want to just chill, we can just But
I gotta go to my night job.
No worries. Thank you both for being here. Everybody else, stick around. I'll have some remarks after this. But I just want to thank you all for being here. And I'm gonna go into BRB mode so I can say bye to these two properly. And y'all just stick around for a minute.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. This is awesome. We'll bring Maria next time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We will.
All right. I'm gonna mute everybody. Let's do this.